行くぞ。
タッチボー決まりだ。タッチレター。
Alright, how's it going everybody? It's Alninio, and in this video I'm going to go over melee DPS optimization guide for beginners, veterans, returning players, you name it. I've always wanted to make a guide like this about melee DPS as a whole because I am a melee main. I love melee DPS. It's my favorite. I main Ninja, I play Viper, I play Reaper as well. Some other melees I play less, but this is going to be melee DPS fundamentals, things you really want to know as a melee DPS, whether you're picking up melee DPS. And this is up to date for 2026 and onwards. And I hope you guys learned something from this. There's a lot I want to talk about in this video, so bear with me. Let's get right into it. We'll start with the absolute basics of every melee, the target and positionals, as well as auto attacks. As melee DPS, if you look at my GCD right now, you can see that there is no X at the bottom left corner. But if you see, when I step out of range, there is an X icon, which means when I use my GCDs right now, they're not going to hit the target. This is going to be very important as in your journey as a melee DPS because of max melee. So, what is max melee? Essentially, when you are just in range, the X on the bottom left of any GCD becomes, there's no more X, which means you can now hit the target. This is going to be very important during raids and mechanics where you want to get from position A to position B very quickly without needing to use a gap closer. There are sometimes in some fights you don't use a gap closer because you can make it by just running. For example, I'll GCD and then run over, go to another target, and keep my GCD rolling from that duration from here to here. And this is something you're going to use a lot with your GCD rolling, where you can carry over a GCD to go somewhere else. For example, this boss can dash from point A. Let me go ahead and reset the dummy so I'm able to do this. This boss can dash from A to B, for example. Now you have options, right? You can GCD and then blink over. By the time he dashes here, you're already here, and you continue GCD rolling. This is probably one of the most important things to master as a melee DPS, is keep your GCD rolling and try to stay in melee range of the target as much as you can. There are some times where you have to walk away from target, and that's based off mechanics. This is something you're going to learn from fight to fight basis. Like, you're going to study exactly, like, okay, how do I gain the most amount of uptime during that scenario? But another thing I want to talk about right now is positionals. Essentially, this gap in the back is the rear. This here is the flank up to here. And there is also, in Dawn Trail at least, and probably in future expansions, they're going to keep this. I will post a picture right now on your screen. This is in the fight M9S, where you can see the boss has a ring around them. And there's no, this means that positionals, you can land any positionals no matter where you're standing. And this happens in some mechanics where they let you land positionals for free. There's some bosses where there's no positionals. This is something you want to keep in mind of, and just know, like, yeah, I can use my positionals, my rear, my flank on the target, no problem, no matter where I'm standing. Okay? Another thing I want to talk about is auto attacks, right? If we target anything here, you can see if I right click the target, this begins auto attacking and it stays on. Now, this is automatically activated whenever you GCD. You can see GCD happens, I'm auto attacking. Okay? And it's very important that you keep auto attacking and staying in melee boss range as much as possible, because whenever I start walking out, obviously I can no longer auto attack, which means I lose DPS by not being close to the target. Now, if I'm in max melee range, when I enter max melee range, my character immediately begins auto attacking, and I can continuously auto attack as long as you're in the maximum range possible, or anywhere around it. Your auto attacks will keep going. And no matter if you cast a GCD or Raitons or Ninjutsu, whatever it is, your character will continuously auto-attack in between your global cooldown. So even if I Raiton, see I'm still auto-attacking. Raiton, auto-attack. G-Spinning Edge, auto-attack. You can see the icon there. It's like a physical damage icon. It's going off even mid-GCDs. It's automatic, essentially. So you want to keep staying in melee range as much as possible because, let me tell you, the auto attacks are a significant portion of your total damage, especially by the end of the fight. You will see just how much your auto attacks alone do throughout the entirety of a fight. In fact, I'm going to pull up one of my logs here. So this fight here is from the Extremes boss fight. This is the week 2 clear. And if I just click this, this was my best performance. You can see right here, auto attacks. This is attack right here. You can see the damage really, really adds up. Got 1.58 million DPS here from just auto attacks alone. And keep in mind, this boss fight, there's so many times where we have to disengage from the target. And right here, this is from M9S. And as you can see right here, attack, 2.01 million damage. That's just from auto attacks. So you get a feeling now, you get the idea. These auto attacks do significant DPS throughout the entire encounter of a fight. So you want to continuously try to stay in melee range to the best of your abilities. Sometimes you do have to walk away from the target, and in those cases you cannot land auto attacks. That's just you having to do the mechanics. But the idea is to minimize the amount of time that you are away from your target so you can land those auto attacks. And minimizing your time away from the boss is everything. That's the beauty of melee DPS. So every melee DPS has some form of gap closer mobility options. And these options are going to allow you to basically able to get back to the boss whenever you have to disengage from a target. And you can instantaneously get back to the target. In Ninja's case, we have Shikuchi. And we'll pick another job here, for example. Viper has 3 dashes to jump on targets. This is your version of getting back to the target. Excuse me, I'm naked. What? I was naked. Apologies. I got new Savage gear and I didn't put on my Viper because I'm playing Ninja. But essentially, this is the idea, is you want to be able to gap close and utilize your GCDs. Use your GCDs to the best of your abilities in close range and then disengage when you have to, and you have to get back to the boss before your GCD finishes rolling, so that you're there in time as your GCD comes up, okay? In Viper's case, it's quite an interesting case because whenever you use Vice Winder on Viper, as an example, I use Viper as an example, this GCD rolls for a very long time. It's a, look at this. Let's see how long it rolls until it becomes available. Now we're gonna dive into disengage tools, okay? See, like, Uncode Fury is a very good range tool. This is a very, very good range tool. And you can use that from distance and then get back to the target. There's some cool things you can do with Gap Closer. Now, since I brought up disengage tools, I'm gonna be talking about that now. So, what does it mean for a disengage tool? Like, what does that necessarily mean? Disengage tool is simply you have ranged attacks as a melee DPS to keep your GCD rolling and be able to have something from a distance. Like, we are using it as a disengage. So for example, I'll show an example here, right? I am max melee and I need to go as far as I can away from the boss because he's about to do a big AoE. GCD walk out, guess what? I have suit on. I get back to the boss, I continue GCDing. My GCD rolling there the entire time, and I made use of a ninjutsu that enables my trick attack. Another disengage with ninja would be Phantom Kamaitachi. We have an ability that is one of my favorite disengage tools. So we would, for example, GCD, walk away, Phantom Kamaitachi, walk back to the target, okay? And I'm talking about the disengage tools that do very significant DPS. For example, Raiton on Ninja. Phantom Kamaitachi is good DPS. You have Throwing Dagger. You have, this is the weakest, worst range tool you can use on Ninja if you don't have the other tools available. this is your last option. There's a priority system for melee DPS, and in this case for Ninja, I'm just giving Ninja as an example. We have Throwing Dagger, which does the least amount of damage out of all the Disengage tools, meaning that we have a priority system where we have Bunshin, Phantom Kamaitachi, we have Reiton, right? You have also like Yosho and many other ninjutsus with Ninja that you can use those tools as a disengage. If you're inside burst window, for example, and you have Tenchi Jin, walk out Tenchi Jin, and then Tenchi Jin, and then you can Raiju dash back to the boss. That is a gap closer, so we can get back to the target. So essentially, you get the idea. You want to consistently think about how you're going to get back to the boss, how long you're going to spend away from the boss while maintaining high DPS. The ranged options that we have for all the melees that are the weakest, weakest range attacks is Throwing Dagger. For Viper, it would be Writhing Snape. Really, I don't think you should really use Writhing Snape. If you just manage your Uncold Fury very well, you won't have to use this. This is like a last resort when you don't have Uncold Fury, because Uncold Fury is a higher DPS. So you want to use the higher DPS Disengage. For Reaper, if I can change the class. For Reaper, you have Harvest Moon. Harvest Moon is a very good disengage tool. Like as you GCD, Harvest Moon, and you can do something cool like that. You have also something really cool with this job as well. I will show now. Something with Reaper is whenever you enter Shroud form, you can do something really cool. Like as you're doing DPS, right? I'm just gonna show an example here. Let's say you have to disengage right now, but you have a cast that you need to cast, right? I would do this, Komonyo, get back to the target, and keep GCD. You see, because there are some melees that have to do casts. And in Viper's case, I'm using Komunyo as an example. This is actually something you can do in DSR. There's like really cool examples of DSR where as your Komunyo comes up, you have to disengage from the boss. This is like a quick disengage to be away from the AoE, Komunyo, and then back to the boss you go. Back to the boss you go. It's really neat stuff that you can do on melee DPS, and it's all about utilizing your range tools as best as possible while being the closest to the target as you can, because you have a lot of good range tools to use. The other range tool we have is Harp. This is a cast range attack that can be used as a disengage tool. It's your other option, and remember, it is always readily available to cast, unlike something like Harvest Moon. For Samurai, we have NP. This is the Samurai range tool. We use this from range. See, with this job, you don't really have like Raiton, Phantom Kamaitachi, TCJ. It's very different. With Samurai, you want to be like melee range, because remember that you really just have one NP. Like you have NPs that you can cast. A lot of what people like to do is they'll do whatever GCD, they'll do this to disengage, and then do that, and then dash back to the boss. This is something obviously you can do if you really need to get away from the target, but essentially, Yaten for Samurai is your disengage tool if you really need to get away from the boss immediately. But a lot of people, they would pop Sprint, and what they would do instead of using a Yaten, they would GCD, walk back to the target as the AoE goes off, so your GCD is rolling, and then GCD, out, back in. There's a lot of people that do this. This is a really good way, so you're not like always using this as your only resort. You can keep your GCD rolling and go back to the boss if you time it properly. And remember to use the max melee rule of maintaining max melee, out, in, just like that. The GCDing, I'm out of the AoE, I'm back in. My GCD is rolling, I didn't lose any GCDs. That is essentially the idea behind this. This is how you play melee fundamentally, okay? It's a lot about taking these risks where you can cast GCDs, and when you get those GCD casts, it feels really good. It's easily one of the best roles in the game. Melee DPS is my favorite role in the game, hands down, because of the cool things you can do, taking risks like this and GCDing and really like optimizing fully what you can do with the job feels really good. So this is your introduction to melee DPS with your returning player, beginner player. Dragoon has Piercing Lance as your range tool. So you want to use Piercing Lance if you're on a distance. You also have a backflip, you have a gap closer, you can get back to the boss, backflip away from the boss, that's your disengage. Every melee has some form of disengage. So remember, disengage tools are very, very important. You really need to utilize the disengage. Cool thing you can do with Dragoon, by the way, with its animation lock high jump, since there are some abilities for melees that are essentially, they're gonna lock you in place. With high jump, if you actually do this, you can maintain movement while using high jump. So you can see, what I did was I pressed it and then I jumped, like pretty much around the same time. And then I was able to just simply get that done that way. It's pretty nice for mobility stuff, and mobility is a big key for melees. Like if I'm trying to high jump and then move away from the target or reposition some way without getting animation locked, this is just a neat little trick you can do with Dragoon. So you can dash to targets, you can also dash on allies. So if you have an ally, you can it's a very cool thing you can do with Monk, is you dash to a target, you GCD, and then dash back to your ally to get away from the GCD, and then dash back in. So you can do like cool 3 dashes in a way, where like you dash, you hit because the boss dashed somewhere, and then you go back and then back in. Really cool tech you can do with Monk. I've seen Monks really cook. It's about finding every single way that you can get uptime, and that's what will make you a better melee DPS. There's always going to be a difference between a player that simply gets out of mechanic and hits normally with GCDs, and then normally gets back to the boss. But you will always have some of the best melee DPS players. They will always try to find ways to mitigate, like to lower the amount of throwing dagger usages in a fight, to get the most amount of GCDs, to utilize max melee, and use that to transition your GCD to where a boss would dash to, or going to another target and using gap closers to get to that other target while maintaining full GCD. And this is really what melee is all about. Melee is all about the beauty of keeping your GCD rolling and maintaining your distance from the target when he's casting something where it's like danger, you need to get out of there. Another thing I would absolutely want to talk about in this video is how do you avoid gaze mechanics or directions that you need to look at while GCDing. This is a very common thing where normal people, you know, the standard way is as you're GCDing and whatever, there is a gaze mechanic. Uh-oh, we look away by pressing S, but now if you press a GCD, your character will look back at the target. See, my character looked back the moment I press the GCD, even if I'm not in range. Boom, my character looks back. So, even if I'm here, my character will look back. To overwrite that, what people would do is, like, they would look away, and then they would simply not press anything, which is really not what you want to do. You want to constantly, like we said, we always want to keep our GCD rolling. So, there are 2 methods you can do, right? One is look away and move while GCDing. This overwrites your movement if you're on legacy controls. This overwrites you moving, overwrites where your character is looking. I'm always looking like this. But there's another cool way, cool way to avoid gaze mechanics is if you're on legacy, hold right click, left click, and then hold down S. Okay? Right here. Right click, left click, S. Now I'm holding S. I'm holding down both the buttons. And this will make my character do this. Like, normally you won't be able to do this, ever. You cannot do this on legacy controls unless you hold down right click, left click, S. And essentially what this will do is it will constantly make your target look like this. And whenever you GCD, look, I don't have to move. I'm wiggling my mouse between each GCD to forcing my character to look in that direction, because no matter what you do, your character will always look back at the target for a millisecond, even if you are overwriting the movement. Even if you're overwriting it by doing this and wiggling your mouse, you're essentially forcing your character to look in that direction, even though he looks back at the target for a millisecond, but I'm forcing him to look that way by holding right click, left click, and S. So this is a very cool thing you can do as melee. If you play standard controls, you just hold down right click and wiggle your mouse. That's it. On legacy controls, you have to hold down 3 buttons down. But obviously the benefit of legacy controls is that you can walk back like this. So legacy controls is definitely really good for solving mechanics, and it feels really good to GCD with it. Like sometimes you hold right click and you GCD, but then after this you go to a completely different direction than your intended position. So it's something to keep in mind with legacy controls. But essentially that's that. That's how you avoid gaze mechanics, or let's say there's a mechanic where you need to look a certain direction to bait an AoE or something like that. Like you shoot something out, you have to look that way. You can GCD, hit the boss during the whole time instead of just looking like this and standing there, just standing there and not using any GCDs to do the mechanic. You can actually greet it. You do GCDs and you're forcing your character to look that way, and then I shoot out whatever I need to shoot out. Okay? That's it. That is essentially it. Another thing to keep in mind is as melees, you have AoE tools, and you have to check what your job, what's the gain on multiple targets is. In Ninja's case, they buffed AoE quite a lot, and right now, Goka Makyaku is a gain on 2, for example. Hyosho is still is your main single target, but Goka Makyaku, the other ninjutsu here, which I will show, the other ninjutsu we have is Goka Makyaku. This is now a gain on 2. So what do we mean when we say gain on 2? It simply means that the potency of Goka Makyaku is very good on 2 targets, which means that if there are 2 targets, you should use a Goka Makyaku instead of a Hyosho Ranryu. This is currently the Dawn Trail Ninja for 7.4 in hours. Each melee DPS has a gain on some amount of targets. Hellfrog is a gain on 2, for example. It also got buffed, so now it's a gain on 2. So it's very important to check what your job gain is, because sometimes during boss fights there are 2 bosses, and you can actually get more DPS on both bosses if you would use certain AoE abilities. For example, with Ninja, Raiton does higher DPS than a Katon, which is AoE. Now, Katon is not a gain on 2. How do we tell if something is a gain on 2 or not? I'll kind of show you here. So if we look at Katon, Katon's potency is 350. So you would 350 multiply that by 2. We multiply it by 2 because we're using 2 targets as an example. If there are, let's say, 5 targets, you would do 350 multiplied by 5. So you multiply that number by the amount of mobs available. Like, this is how you know if something is a gain or a loss. Raiton, for this example, does 740 potency on a singular target. So Raiton versus Katon. If there are 2 targets, if we do 350 multiplied by 2, it would be 720 damage. Raiton is 740 damage, meaning that Raiton is higher DPS. And keep in mind, Raiton also gives you Raiju, which is very nice, so it is extra DPS here. This doesn't just apply to AoE stuff, where there is some stuff that's a gain on a certain amount of targets. There's also single target stuff as well, single target priority. For example, with Ninja, I will use Ninja as an example, with Bunshin no Jutsu. With Bunshin, it is a clone DPS. You're choosing between Raiton and Raiju. You have a priority system. Raiju would deal higher damage in the instance you have Bunshin, because it will hit twice with the clone DPS. See? It hits twice. This is higher than a singular Raiton, which means you want to prioritize Raiju over Rayton inside your burst. Instead of doing double Rayton, you would do double Raiju. You would do Rayton, Raiju, Rayton, Raiju in that order. Because you want to prioritize fitting all the burst in the initial burst and utilizing all the raid buffs for Raiju. This includes if we Tenchi Jin. If we Tenchi Jin, the Rayton from TCJ gives us a Raiju. So we have to also factor that. We can get multiple Raijus. We can get multiple Raijus inside burst, and we want to prioritize Raiju when we have Bunshin. So there's always finding out about your job, what is considered a gain on single target, what is considered a gain on AoE, to really maximize your full DPS. There are some abilities that are also very good in general on single target and AoE, like Tenri Jindo is a great ability here that hits multiple targets and does 1.1k potency to all targets. It's a very good AoE tool, but is also used in single target because of just the sheer amount of damage it does. 1.1k potency is nothing to scoff about. It is very good DPS. Now I want to talk about targeting and how I target. Okay, targeting is one of the most important things. Okay, and I just want to say that this is my personal opinion on this. It's how I personally like to play Ninja or melee DPS in general. I like to use tab on closest target. So I'm going to go ahead and go to keybinds real quick. This is the first thing I do, right? I go here to targeting, and then I have set tab to target nearest enemy, because I want to always, whenever I press tab, I want to target the nearest enemy. And then I have shift tab to cycle through enemies from nearest to farthest. So I have the option to cycle between targets, and I have the option to target whatever's nearest to me, because I'm a melee DPS. As a melee DPS, I want to target what's nearest to me. Here's how targeting works, right? If I am looking away, I cannot target. But as soon as something comes in my visual, like it doesn't have to be, your character doesn't have to face for you to target something. I can be facing away, right? And I can turn my mouse. I'm mashing tab right now. As soon as the striking dummy appeared on my screen, even when I'm looking away, it's the camera position how you end up targeting. You see? See that? Now when I moved my camera even more, it targeted this one because this one is the actual nearest target to me. The other one isn't. But because I put it in my camera view, now see? I'm still mashing tab. I'm still mashing tab. This is the nearest one to me. With cycling, I like it from nearest to furthest because it just feels good to me to do nearest to furthest. Because I'm a melee, I'd rather cycle between targets from nearest to furthest. So targeting is very important. In the event that there's a target that's further away, let's say there's two targets, right? There's a target here, and this is the one I'm hitting. And I need to feint that other target. You have two options, right? Let me put them in my enmity list. You can click on the enmity list and then feint that target, or whatever it is you want to do on that, right? Or you can simply shift tab to swap it. So what I personally do is I use both methods, honestly. I use the enmity list to put feint on that target, and then I would press tab because it's the nearest target to me to keep GCDing. So I would do this, and GCD. It's like I'm doing something here, tab, just like that. I do use the enmity list, and sometimes I cycle, especially if it's two targets. I tend to just click on the enemy list because I know when the target's going to do a cast, and I can feint that and keep GCDing. Just something to think about. Just make sure you do it in the middle of your GCD rolling. Another small quick tip I can give you is before you start the raid encounter, make sure you right-click the target right at the beginning, because the GCD will instantly come out the moment you get into melee range. And obviously you do GCDs, by the way. GCDs activate auto attack as well. Just keep in mind that I always just press right click before, just so the auto attack immediately begins starting before I even cast the GCD. It's just like it's already activated. Obviously with Ninja, you already press suit on, so it already enables auto attack by default. But it's just a habit that I have. I just right click the boss in the beginning, just to get the auto attack, the very first auto attack anyway, just a little bit faster. Now I'm going to talk about character configuration for target. Here is my targeting settings. I have auto target according to priority is the closest range. I have enable full auto target. I have, since I use tab for targeting the closest enemy, you can kind of go whatever here. Either you go ignore depth or cone. I just use cone because I've been really used to it right now. I've been used to it for years, and so I use target close enemy with cone. And we have ground targeting settings. Limit ring to targeting range and press action twice to execute. You really want to enable those two options, okay? You really do, because it's just going to make your ground targeting stuff a lot faster. Ninja specifically has that, where if you use Shikuchi, it goes at the maximum range possible without showing a blue icon. This is just very quickly, so I can like, boom, I'm just out of there in the maximum range possible. I don't have to worry about the input not going through because I moved my mouse just a little bit higher and then it wasn't in maximum range. And it can be pretty annoying if that is the case, but this is just the fastest way you can Shikuchi on targets. Definitely a lot easier to do on mouse and keyboard compared to a controller, so keep this in mind with gap closing. It's a very important tool, and we utilize Shikuchi a lot with Ninja to gain max melee uptime, so we can keep our GCD rolling. There's some really fancy cool stuff you could do with Ninja, for real. It is awesome. So yeah, that's where Shikuchi comes in. It is a playmaking dash. So obviously I have it to where I double tap it. I don't have to left click, so that is the benefit. And of course, for those curious, auto target according to priority, and then closest range is the auto target priority, simply means that normally, if you mash a GCD, it won't actually hit anything unless you tab target it. But because we have the option enabled here, auto target according to priority closest range, I personally like it on closest range. It makes it so that as soon as a boss appears from a transition or whatever, you just mash the GCD and you will instantly begin attacking without needing to press tab and then GCD. So something to keep in mind. That's why we have the option enabled. As for target types, I use ignore depth. I'll kind of just demonstrate the differences between cone and ignore depth. If we select cone right here and I press tab normally, because I have the keybind selected to closest enemy, it's just going to target the closest enemy no matter what. But if I use cycling target, which I am right now with shift tab, it does not target any enemies that I am not facing. So I'm facing this way, but I cannot target the striking that is behind me unless I turn like this. See, now I can target because I am actually putting my camera on them. But with just pressing tab, you don't have to worry about that. You just press tab for target closest enemy and the keybinds. If you do that, you just do this like that and it targets the nearest enemy no matter what. Now I'll explain ignore depth. Simply ignore depth means that you can cycle between targets even when looking away, even if your camera is not facing them. It's just that simple. It's pretty nice. As long as they are in my visual screen and I can see them, I can cycle between them. That's essentially it. Honestly, it's personal preference which one to use. But yeah, essentially I use ignore depth because I've been used to it. So I've used both types. It's not really that major of a difference for me. I just like targeting something even without necessarily looking at it when it comes to cycling. But like I said, a lot of the time, I just use normal tab closest to enemy through the keybinds. So this doesn't really matter too much for me, but it might matter for you if you use default cycle target. But yeah, I like to use target closest enemy by default with tab. So this for me is not that big of a deal, really. But yeah, I'd say stick with ignore depth because this way you don't have to face your enemies when cycling and you can simply look away, and as long as they're on your screen, they can be targeted like that. Another thing I recommend here is under control settings and character configuration, control settings, and then mouse. I would suggest you disable this. Enable clicking on field to remove target. I have it disabled so that it removes accidental detargets, which can happen. I'll kind of demonstrate what I mean by this. So whenever I target something, I'm mashing left click right now on the just anywhere that's not a target, and I am maintaining my lock onto the target. Even if I'm like, sometimes you move your camera and stuff and then you detarget it by accident and then you have to retarget it again by pressing tab. So essentially, to detarget, you just press escape. just like so. If you want to detarget or if you want to switch target, you do this. A lot of times you just want to always have something targeted anyway. But yeah, this really helps just in general. If you don't find it comfortable and you're used to clicking away to detarget, then by all means go for that. But this just helps to not detarget by accident when holding left click to move your camera and stuff like that. But yeah, it's pretty good. I would also recommend disable right click selection of minions and disable right click selection of player characters. This just generally helps you not accidentally click other players inside raids. And you know, it can get pretty annoying when you do that, especially because when you use right click, you actually use right click to move your character while holding right click and WASD. So you don't want to accidentally click a player character mid raid, and it can be pretty annoying when you do that, when you're just actually just trying to move, but then you accidentally click a player character because they're right there. So yeah, these settings just simply help. They help with not having these annoying errors happen sometimes, like right-clicking player character by accident, left-clicking the air, and then detargeting. These are just settings that help you have it be consistent. The minion thing is not really that big of a deal. It's not, you can't have minions in battles, but I just disable them because I find it annoying that I can right-click minions. So yeah, that's essentially it. I definitely enable clicking on self. I don't want to click on myself by accident. That's just annoying. If I want to ever click on myself, I just click on myself in the party list over here. So now I'm going to show you guys some boss mechanic examples where I execute this in actual raids. In this video example here, I'm going to show you exactly how I greet a GCD while looking at a certain direction. This is one tech you can do. I'm holding right click, left click, and S right here, and I have to aim my thing here that's on me in that direction. I have to aim it outside the arena. So I'm able to right click, left click, and then hold down S, all those buttons held down, and I'm continuously able to GCD without having to like worry about anything. Look, I'm still GCDing. The thing is facing outwards. That's it. That's the mechanic of that in M12S Phase 1. So here's another example from the fight M10S. There are tethers going off here, and I have to jump between each tether while maintaining my melee uptime. So you can see I do my final GCD here, instantly blink. I obviously know where he's gonna dash to, so I land a GCD, land another GCD, Shikuchi on this, land a GCD. I've already popped sprint to make it to this GCD, GCD again, and then make it finally here. Throughout that entire part, I didn't have to throw a single throwing dagger. I didn't have to do a right-on. I didn't have to do Phantom Kamaitachi. I didn't have to use any of my quote-unquote disengage tools because I utilized my weapon skill GCDs basically perfectly. So I don't have to use my other range tools since I need Suton for ninja especially to get my trick attack. So we just utilize Shikuchi, and we use movement, and we use the transitioning from GCD, max melee, and going to the other target. I like to just call it transitioning because I'm transitioning from point A to point B, carrying over my GCD and getting full uptime. So this is an example right there. Here's an example from the fight M11S. You can see I am positioning myself for the sword. I disengage GCD roll, 10 Chi Jin so I can get my Suton. I 10 Chi Jin specifically here because my trick attack is 16 seconds. So this is something you have to do as a ninja. And then I GCD, wait for this to go off, walk in GCD at the perfect time as my GCD is rolling, blink over, and make it to the boss and kept my GCD rolling the entire time. So here's an example from the fight M11S. As you can see, dash to the sword, I move to the side. I get the Raiju off. I get a Raiton here since I'm inside burst, and I get the Raiju off and walk out of that AoE. And I land another GCD here to keep my GCD rolling as I walk towards where he's gonna dash to do the next mechanic. So my GCD is rolling the entire time with just weapon skills, no throwing dagger used. Go to the sword, GCD, go to my group. GCD right here again. GCD, go to the mechanic, and here's the one that's out. So this one, as my GCD rolling, watch. I GCD, and I walk back. Fully maintaining melee uptime, and right here, as the last and final disengage before I bait the Protean from the tornado, I land one more GCD. In this example, my trick attack is 24 seconds, and I need to suit on when it reaches around 20. So I can afford to land one more GCD without messing up the mechanic. As you can see here, I land the GCD, I position myself here, my trick attack is 22 seconds. Now I have a perfect disengage tool that is actually beneficial for ninja, which is Suton. So I go 10, Chi, Jin. Look, by the time I cast Suton, I baited this thing already. I'm still GCDing with because I'm doing mudras. And I get the Suton on my trick attack, hits 20 seconds. And instantly, gap close to the boss, GCD it, and I've maintained full uptime for the entire duration. And not a single throwing dagger has been used. These are the kind of plays you want to look for as a melee DPS, is finding these little moments like that where you get full uptime and use range tools that are actually beneficial. In Ninja's case, they're very beneficial. And that's where you want to be with Ninja. So here's one from my YouTube shorts. This is from M8S in the Cast Revolutionary Reign. So let's see where the boss goes to. I GCD. I Shikuchi over. My GC is still rolling the whole time. Shikuchi, and then Rayton as my disengage tool. Now I would Suton here if my trick attack is at 20 seconds or below. But essentially, this is how I utilize my Shikuchi and maintained full GCD roll, full uptime. So here's the gaze. Look, I'm looking away. I'm gonna look. It counts as a dodge. So as long as the cast bar ends, I can look back at the target, and this is something we do with cast bars, essentially. We can look at the cast bar once the cast bar ends. We can look at a target or move into specific AoEs. Or whatever it is, just make sure you look at the cast bar because you can gain uptime that way. Just remember, normally I can just GCD like this, like we said with gaze mechanics. I just wanted to demonstrate an example of snapshotting and how you can still look at the target. Even when the animation doesn't go off, the cast bar is done, so it's locked in place. Here's a really cool thing you can do in M11S with Orbital Omen to maintain full melee uptime. We can stick around the boss and do this mechanic. Normally, you would just dodge into the one, but the portal has tethers there and they have an intersection over here. You can dodge into it, but that means losing melee uptime. So the way we go about it is, in this mechanic specifically, is we look at this. This is intersection 1, and we go opposite of it. And then intersection 2 is where I'm standing. So this is my starting position. I'm going to move forward and back. And look how I look at the cast, right? I wait, cast, move, go back, boom. Didn't get hit, perfectly timed, and maintained full uptime on the target. Now, the reason I'm demonstrating this is because each raid, each boss fight is going to have really interesting ways that you can get melee uptime, stay within boss range, and able to do dodges like this. I'll show another example. Here's another example of Orbital Omen where it's a different pattern. For example, look at this. We go opposite of the first intersection over here, the second intersection here. So I would have to do one dodge and then go across. In this example anyway. So look at this, right? I look at the cast bar, Fire and Fury. I wait. Look. I move around 90% of the cast bar because this this snapshot on this mechanic is quite interesting, let's say. You want to be quick. So I move here, move across. Look at that. I'm going to show that again, okay? Just so really capture that idea. Look at this. Even though it might seem like I'm literally on top of the AoE, look. It literally shows like as if I'm on top of it. But with perfect timing, the way in FF14 how it works is you can just literally walk on top of AoEs as long as you're not in it when it goes off. So if I'm outside but the cast already happened, even if I walk into it later, I'm gonna be fine. So that's just some neat tricks you can do with melee uptime, is just really understanding the mechanic to allow you to do cool stuff like this. And my GCD is rolling the entire time. All right, here we go. He's gonna do a knockback. Instantly able to get back to the target, This is another cool thing you can do. I do want to mention as well that there is a melee limit break priority depending on who your other melee is. Essentially, the way I'm going to put it is Dragoon, Monk, and Ninja all have equal priority in terms of who LBs. It's going to be one of those three. They're all equal in priority. What comes after Ninja is Viper, then Samurai, then Reaper. Reaper is very dependent on their job gauge, so that's why they have the least priority in who melee LBs, essentially. As for Viper's case, they need to build gauge so that they can use double reawaken, which is their big burst, and they have to make sure that they have enough gauge to be able to do that. And using LB means you're not GCDing, essentially. As for Samurai's case, LBing pretty much guarantees that you lose Amidare and Suim Gaishi, which is your big hit. It essentially misaligns your rotation. So it really hurts Samurai a lot in this case. So hopefully I have illustrated my points well for you guys to understand melee DPS and just the magic that you can do with melee DPS. It's why I love melee DPS so much. I've been playing it for years. I've done all Savage content as melee DPS. I've done all Ultimate content on melee DPS. Specifically, Ninja is my all-time favorite. I do play the other melee DPS, but I think Ninja is one of the best jobs in the game, to be fair. That's my Ninja bias talking. So as you can see, I showed you guys some examples. I showed you guys the importance of melee uptime, and this is just a guide to help you on your melee DPS journey. Okay. I appreciate you all very much for watching this video. I hope it has helped you out, and best of luck on your adventures with melee DPS. Take care of yourselves and much love. Peace out.